Hi everybody! When I started making 3D printers a while back, I quickly realized that this could be a valuable tool for a luremaker. Of course, at that point they were way too expensive for a luremaker like me to actually go into that area. But now the prices have dropped to a level that matches my budget, and a little while back I went ahead and bought this 3D printer. Once I had ordered the 3D printer and was waiting for it to arrive, I actually realized there was a lot of things I didn't know about 3D printing. I had a lot of questions on basic stuff that I needed to find answers to. Well, I did what I always do. I watched a lot of videos on YouTube and read a lot of articles and found answers to those questions. Although I still have a lot to learn about 3D printing, at least I like to share those answers with you. And if you're considering buying a 3D printer for your own luremaking, this might help you make the decision. I like to start by saying that I haven't regretted buying the 3D printer at any time. This printer really makes so much stuff much easier. First of all, of course, resizing a master suddenly is as easy as pushing a button. As you can see here, I just reduced the master 10% to get a smaller shot. Also, it's very easy for you to change your design and add details to the same master and make a new print of it, like this one. Also, the printer can be used for making materials and tools for your luremaking. This is a very simple print, which is an L profile, which I can assemble by 4 pieces here to make a frame for a mold. Also, I made some funnel bits I can put in the mold when I cast new molds. I'm sure along the way I'll figure out a lot of nice prints for other stuff as well. Let's just have a short run through the content of this movie. First of all, we'll talk a bit about the printer and the basic parts of that one. I won't get into details because there's a lot of much better movies out there that you should watch on that subject. Also, I'll have a very short talk about materials, but actually I don't have much experience about that one as I've only been using PLA so far. When we've done that, we'll just go to the computer and have a quick look at the 2 programs I'm using for my luremaking, and you could consider using the same, or there's tons of other programs that does the same, but of course it's a matter of opinion what you want to use. Then I think we'll take a time lapse of a small print to see how everything is working, and in the end we'll take a little talk about how to get from the print to something you can actually use, how you clean up the print and maybe smoothen the surfaces and so on to get to something you can actually use for making a mold. In the end, we'll have some sort of conclusion, but I think you already know what I'm thinking. Well, let's just start by having a look at the hardware. My printer is a Creality Ender 3. This is an open source printer, which means that the software is open for modifications, and also the general design is open for making modifications. And a lot of people out there on the internet is showing you how to make improvements to this printer. I have only used a few of them, but along the way I'm sure that I'll be using more to get better prints or just to have a nicer printer. Okay. The Creality Ender 3 is probably in the cheaper end of the range. I think at this moment the printer is being sold for about $230 or 215 euros. But as it has very good reviews and really, according to my experience, delivers very nice prints, you really should consider if you need to use more on a 3D printer if you're just going to use it for luremaking. Okay, well, let's just run through the parts of the printer. First of all, there's the heated bed. This is where the print is being generated. It's heated up to ensure that the print sticks to the surface of the bed so it doesn't move around while the printer is moving. Up here you'll have the print head. This is the one that heats up the filament and pushes it out through a small nozzle here, making the print. There's also a bit of a small fan here that ensures that once the filament leaves the nozzle, it should be cooled down as quickly as possible to ensure that it's hot when the next layer is being generated. Okay? Down here you have the CPU of the printer. This is the one that does all the processing and making sure that everything is at the right place at the right time and having the right temperature. That is about it. And also this is where you put your SD card when you transfer your files. The computer is controlled through this interface. This is the one that starts and stops prints, preheats stuff, moves things around and everything. It's a very simple display and stuff, but I'll run it through later when we do a print. Okay, back here we have the power supply that ensures that everything has the power that it needs for the job. And up here you'll find the filament that is used for the printing. Let's just have a small talk about filament. Filament is the plastic that will end up as your print. It comes in many different types that has different hardness, different strength, maybe other properties that will be better for the purpose they're used for. But for lure making, I really think that you don't need to be very adventurous. I've been using PLA for all the stuff that I've done so far, but I'm considering also testing out ABS, as that will give me some other possibilities when it comes to finishing up the surface afterwards. But so far I've been quite satisfied with just using PLA. Now let's move over to a computer and have a look at the software part of 3D printing. When you want something printed on your 3D printer, there's two ways you can go. You can either download design from other people or you can make your own. Let's start with the simple thing of downloading design from others. There's probably a lot of different libraries out there on the internet, but one place you should know is a place called Thingiverse. Thingiverse is a place that has designs from all you can imagine printing on your 3D printer. Also fishing lures. So if you go ahead and search for fishing lures, you'll get this. And you'll see there's a lot of different designs here and probably getting more every day. Everything you find in here is free to download and use for your own personal use. And let's just have a look at this nice crankbait here. So when you open this, you will see some different images. First of all, the result overview of the design as it is printed. An example of how it looks on the inside. Painting example. Well, it catches fish, as you can see. Many. And also in this design you actually get a stencil for making tiger stripes. Very nice. All of this is free and you can just download the files. This is just a commercial for Dropbox, and also you can tip the designer if you want him to show you appreciation of his design. And then you'll get the file down here. Okay? And this file contains of different things about licenses and stuff like that. But what's interesting is this up here, the files. I'll just open this folder. And in here, you'll find what you need to get a design printed. 3D designs comes in form of STL files. STL files is a file type where the object has had its surface covered in triangles to describe how it looks. I will show you that later when we make our own designs. As you can see, this design has the lure and also the stencil here. These are the two things you get, and you can print from that. And then from then on, it's just getting it to your slicer and print it. But we'll get on to that later. So I just want to show you that it's very easy to download files and print them here. Okay? But let's face it, we all want to make our own designs. And to do that, you'll need a 3D drawing program. There's lots of those out there as well, but I have found that there's a lot of tutorials and help to get if you use Fusion 360. So that's my favorite so far. Okay? And
Fusion 360 is actually free to use as long as it's for personal use. So now we got Fusion 360 open. I don't want to claim to be an expert in this, so if you're going to use Fusion 360 like I am, you should consider finding some of the other YouTubers out there that help you with expert advice on Fusion 360. Well, for this time, I'll just give you a quick tour of some of the designs I've made so far, which isn't that many, but well, there'll be a lot to come. First of all, you can see my first shot, and if I can find my mouse here, this is it. This, as you can see, is a very standard shot type design, which was the first I actually made. And if you remember the prints from the beginning of the movie, this is the one from the two white ones. At a later point, I actually took this and made a little improvements of it, and also made some more details, which you can see in this design. Still a very common shad design. I also started making a jerkbait, which well, is far from finished, but at least I think I have the overall design of it, and at some later point I'll finish this one and use it as a master for jerkbaits. Also, I've been working a bit of a V-tailed shad design like this one, long slim with a V-tail, and as you can see, if I turn off some of the parts here, I've actually consist of two parts, a head part with a corkscrew mount and a tail. Okay, when you're starting working with these, you quickly get to consider what is it actually I want. Is my goal actually to get a master from which I can make a mold, or do I want to skip a part and go directly to making the mold? So for that part, I've just started a design of making a plate that will actually be a plate that can be used directly for making the mold. So skipping the part of making the master. So, well, that's a thing I'll be looking into later. Okay, let's just skip to this part. Okay, now I've finished my design and I'm ready to start printing, and this is the thing I want to print. Okay, in this program I go to 3D print up here, and I select my object. This is what I want to, and actually I want not to send it to the print utility because I want to use another one. And if we wait a little, I think I need like that to select it, we will actually be able to see the print represented as an STL with the whole body covered in triangles. And as you can see from the details here, it is, well, it's a lot of triangles, but just to make it visible for you. Okay, and when you've done that, you'll just press OK and select a destination for your print. As you can see, it'll end up as an STL file even here. I'll just cancel it because I have several files of this. Now that we have the STL file, you might think that we are ready to print, but not quite yet. Before we can do that, we need a file that can tell the printer how to actually print the design. And to do that, you need what they call a slicer program. And for that, there's a lot of different options out there. Again, I'm using the one that came with the printer, which is called Cura. So I'll just open that. When you first open Cura, the first thing you'll have to do is set up the program. This is to ensure that you don't try to print outside the bed and the object you are trying to print isn't too big for the printer. Once you entered your printer's properties into Cura, you're ready to start making print files. Okay, and that's just what I'll do now. So I'll just open a file, an STL file, and this is my lovely chat, which I showed you before. This could also be the one I've downloaded from Thingiverse, but I won't do that. Well, and as you can see, it displays my chat here lying on the side in the printer. I don't want that. I don't want it lying on the back, so I'll just choose it and choose rotate and turn it over 90 degrees if possible, like that. And as you can see, it automatically moves it so that it's not cutting down through the bed here. And now it's actually more or less ready to print. Okay, so I'll just have to choose what quality I want the print to be. And the quality is, in general, the thickness of the layers for the print. If you have very thin layers, it will be very fine surface, but also it will take a lot of time. So if you can see with the fine setting here, which is 0.1 millimeter layers, you'll have a printing time of 2 hours 25 minutes. But if I don't need this fine detail or quality, so I'll just go to the draft, and in a little while it will have recalculated the printing time. I'll just do another slicing, and you can see I reduced my printing time to half the time. So you really have to consider if you need the higher quality or if you just want a print to be able to see how it looks in real life. Of course, if you're printing at night, which I often do, it doesn't really matter if it's 2 or 4 hours because it will be finished in the morning anyway. Okay, well, for this one, I've set the quality to fine. And then there's a lot of different settings I can change. And if you want to use the optimal setting for your printer, you should go and watch some YouTubes. There's a lot of YouTubes on tuning your Cura into making the best print on your printer. But there's a few things you need to consider. First of all, to reduce the amount of materials needed, and of course also the printing time, you should use infill less than 100%. This meaning that the inside of the object will be filled with only a little bit of material. And for this, as you can see, I normally use 20%, which will mean that I'll only have 1/5 of the material used for the internal parts. And you can use different patterns. I'm using triangles, and as you can see on the print, I have just stopped in the middle here to be able to see what's inside, and you can see that this is how the triangle infill look like. So this is a thing. I think you can go below 20%, but it's fine with me. This will also, of course, the less infill you use, the quicker you'll print. Okay. Also, you can't have printing in mid-air. As you can see, this one is only touching the bed on the top of the fin, so you'll need some sort of support to support the print while it's being printed. And for that, you'll have to check this one, which is generating some support for the print. After you print it, you'll have to cut this off, and if you can avoid it, of course, it might be an idea to do it in another way. But generally, you can't print in midair, so if you have something that is hanging out over the bed, you'll have to use support. And if I wanted to make a print like this, well, I'll use support. So as you can see on the print, I've just stopped here where I have, which is actually a print of this, the lovely chat. You can see that there's some support that supports the chat's body. Okay. One thing I'm considering for a later print is, of course, do I really need the body of the master to be in one print? Why not cutting it in half, putting it flat down on the bed when printing, so I don't have any support to remove afterwards? So I'll probably do that in the future, but this is just for show, and well, let's just get on with it. For this print, which I'm going to use for a time lapse to show you how the printing process works, I really don't need it to be that high of detail and good a quality. So I'll just start by changing this one to draft, as that will give me a much better printing time. Also, I really don't need it to be full size. It could be scaled a bit. So I'll just scale it down to 100 millimeters in length, like that. Okay, and once it's done slicing, you'll see that we'll get down to 34 minutes printing time, which is very nice considering it's a 3D print. Okay, and as you can see, I already have my micro SD card in the computer, so I can go ahead directly and save my file to that. Okay, file saved, it says, and I can take out the 3D card and go to the printer.
Okay, now we have the print here on the SD card, and I'll just put that one into the printer down here, like that. Okay, and then I'll just open the menu here. Just need to turn the right way, like that. Print from SD. There's a Lovely Chat version 3 here, and I'll just start printing that. Okay, the first thing that happens here is that now everything needs to heat up. So first of all, it will heat up the bed to 60 degrees, which is the correct temperature for PLA. And after that, it will heat up the hot head for 200 degrees, which is also the correct thing for PLA. And then it will start printing. Okay, and I've just set up my my camera here for time lapse, so I'll just turn that one on, like that. And well, we'll just leave it here and see how everything turns out. Okay, now the print is finished and we can just go ahead and snap it off the heat bed. So that's just what I'll do. Like that. Okay, and here we have the finished print with the support and everything. And if we are a bit lucky, most of the support can just be broken off with the fingers here. If not, we'll have to use a plier, and with my printer I got this little side cutter here, which probably will help me a lot, like that. And then you just have to trim off as much of the support as you can, but there's no doubt that the surface here on top where the support has been isn't optimal. So that's why I actually in the future consider to cut my masters down, my designs down in half and print them in 2 halves and then glue them together afterwards. This will leave me a much better surface, but for this it's actually okay. You can trim it off with the plier here, maybe use a knife, and in the end just use some sandpaper, and you will get a surface that is close to the same as here on the sides. But of course, still the surface isn't really smooth. And just like when you're making a wooden lure or whatever, a wooden master, the easiest way would probably be just to go ahead and use some spackle. With this one, I've actually used some spray spackle. like this one, which is just sprayed onto the lure. You can then, in between layers, use a bit of sandpaper. And well, at this point, this has had 3 layers. It is starting to get a lot more smooth, but I think a few layers more and it will be quite nice. Otherwise, you will always have the option to use a bit of epoxy on it, just like when you epoxy coat your lures. Put on a layer or 2 of epoxy, put them in the lure rotator, and that will probably give you a nice smooth surface as well. A third thing that I haven't tried yet is that, as I talked about earlier, there's another filament called ABS, and ABS has the property that it will actually dissolve a bit when exposed to acetone fumes. So the way some people do is that they take their final print of ABS plastics and put it into a small chamber with acetone fumes. This will dissolve the surface and make it run out and give a smooth surface. So that's for sure something I will try later. But for now, as the ABS will require me to have a glass plate on my heat bed, I will have to do with the PLA. That said, actually, with the PLA and with the settings I've used in this movie, I made this one. It is the same print as this one, but it's just with the fine great quality in the cure. And well, with a bit of sandpaper and everything, I actually went ahead and used this as master in a mold. And from that mold I casted some soft baits, and these soft baits I used a bit of the soft bait paint on, and then dipped them in soft plastic again up to about here, and this will give me a bait like these ones, which are actually very nice and worked well. As you can see in this short clip, I actually managed to catch a few pikes on them on my first trip with it, so I'm quite satisfied with that. And that gives me a thought that maybe sometimes you should consider what surface you really need on your lures. At least this showed me that well, the fish don't really care about the surface of the lures, but still, you want a nice surface. Well, it's quite easy to get that either with spackle or epoxy. Well, if you should sum all this up in some sort of conclusion, well, I guess you already know what I'm thinking. The 3D printer is a great tool. It gives you a lot of opportunities, both for making gear for your lure making, but also making the lures itself, or at least the masters. Because if I should use this for printing the lures, I would think that it was simply a too slow process compared to making a mold and casting it in resin. So for me, this will always only be to make masters, and just enjoying the flexibility it gives me to stretch and scale, upscale, downscale, add details, less details, larger tails. All these things will suddenly be very easy just to go to your computer, make minor details, make a new print, and test it. And one way, if you have, if you watch one of my other movies where I actually cast prototypes of lures in casting sand, well, you can of course also do that with these. Just one thing, I actually tried that with these ones, and due to the bait being fairly small, it did have some areas where the shrinkage of the soft plastic made dents in the surface. So with the smaller baits, I think it's a bit harder to get a good result in casting sand. But for larger baits, I would expect this one to be able to do that. In casting sand, you'll be able to go ahead, make a prototype that is fishable, and go ahead directly out to the to your lake and test it. And I know for sure that these prototype baits actually will catch fish as well. So if you only want 2 or 3 baits of each, well, why ever make a mold? But that's another thing. I hope you found this little movie useful, or if you're considering buying a 3D printer, it either convinced you to do so or not to do so. Well, I think it should convince you to do so because, well, it is a really good tool. There's no doubt that in the future you will see me using this 3D printer a lot more in my projects. So if you're interested in this, make sure that you subscribe to my channel. Also, maybe go to my Facebook page and like that one, as there's a lot of content that I make from my daily work in the studios that never reach a movie here on YouTube. Well, I hope you like my movie and I hope you'll be back to see more. Now there's only one thing left to say. I hope you see me soon.